Are you stuck in the wrong phase of development? Are you an entrepreneur building an app-based business, but you don't have any programming skills and maybe you don't have a technical background? Well, if that's you, we found a lot of people in the same position aren't aware of the four different stages of development, and therefore they get stuck in the wrong one for too long. If you're new around here, my name is Kristen Youngs, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps. We help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding. And today we're going to talk about the four stages of development so you can make sure that you're not stuck in the wrong one, and especially for too long, so that you can keep moving forward with your app and building your app-based business. So what we're going to do is hop over to the whiteboard and dive into this more in depth. So first, let's talk about what the four stages of development are and why people get stuck in each stage, so you can figure out, number one, which stage you're in, and number two, if it's the right stage to be in for you. So the stages of development kind of look like this. First, we start with the idea stage. This is when you have your initial idea for your app solution, okay? And the purpose of this stage really is to get feedback, right? So that you can validate your solution, all right? Validation is the ultimate goal here. You want to make sure that there's a need for the solution that you're creating. So this might involve, talking to your market. Depending on who your market is, these conversations can look different. It's going to involve research and conversations of some sort. But ultimately, your goal here is just to validate your solution so that you can move into the next stage. Now, the next stage is the alpha stage. Now, in the alpha stage, this is when you build your core product, your mission critical features only. So only the features you need in order to solve the very, very core problem you've identified. So this is really your slimmed down product that solves one problem, the core problem for your core user, right? It's the core solution that everything else builds on top of. Now, your goal in the alpha stage is to do testing. Okay, so you build out those core features during this stage, and then you test them so that you can make sure it's functioning properly. Okay, so your goal here really is functionality. So you're really just making sure that your product works. Okay, you're not testing for anything beyond that other than making sure the solution works, because until you have a working solution, none of the next steps really matter, right? But once you do have that working solution, you move into the next stage, which is the beta stage. Now, the beta stage is when you start adding on some of your next features. Now, we follow a specific process for building out an MVP, and while your alpha stage involves creating your must-haves or your mission-critical features and testing for that functionality, your beta stage moves to the next step, which are your should-have features. Now, your should-have features, they might be mission critical to your MVP or to your minimum viable product, but they're not time sensitive. That means they're not really necessary for testing for that initial core functionality, okay? But what they are necessary for is another type of testing, and that's testing for adoption. So in the beta stage, you're going to start bringing on your beta users. Now, when you go into beta testing, you want to be testing for adoption. You want these beta users to be consistently using your solution to solve the core problem it's been created for. And you want to help refine the way in which that problem is solved. So you know your solution is functioning because you already went through the alpha stage. Now you're making sure it's solving the problem well. You might start enhancing some of the features, streamlining some of the features, adding on some user experience touches, for example. So they're going to enhance, optimize, or streamline the way you are solving that problem so that the app is adoptable, so that it can be used consistently. All right, so adoption is really your ultimate goal here. Okay, and then the last phase on the right is your rollout phase. Now, your rollout phase and really your beta phase too, these will happen in cycles throughout the lifetime of your app. So in the rollout phase, you're going to continue getting feedback in an ongoing way, but your goal here is really expansion. So this is where you start expanding beyond just that core solution, beyond just that core refined, the core refined solution, and beyond that core problem, and maybe even beyond that core user. You might start solving a bunch of different problems, potentially for multiple different users, right? So you can think of this like becoming an all-in-one solution or becoming a full scope solution. That's really what you are focusing on in the rollout phase. Now, sometimes you'll jump back into the beta phase. You might release a full new feature set that you want to, again, go through that alpha testing and then go through the beta testing for adoption, and then continue forward in the rollout phase. So you can kind of jump back and forth there. But what we've found is that most app entrepreneurs who don't necessarily have backgrounds in app development, they might not have programming backgrounds or technical backgrounds. What they end up doing, and honestly, even those with that type of background end up doing this a lot, is they end up skipping the middle two stages. Sometimes they even breeze through the first stage. So they kind of go from this idea stage and try to jump straight into the rollout stage. Okay. Now, the problem with this is that it puts them in a vastly wrong stage at the wrong time, but they don't understand the significance or even the existence of those initial two stages. And if that's you, that's okay, right? That's okay, because the reality is you don't know what you don't know, right? So you can't execute this type of thing perfectly and have this go off without a hitch when this isn't your background. This isn't the thing that you have focused your career on, right? Most likely the thing you focused your career on is what you're building your solution for, or maybe your solution is related to that. And that's why you're pushing forward with this, because you know you have a good solution. But it can be like stepping into a whole new world when you come into app development, because there is a specific process you need to follow in order to really do the least to get the most. That's something that I like to talk about a lot, doing the least to get the most. You want to do the smallest amount of work, or put in the least amount of effort to get the most maximized results. Now, if you go from your idea stage and you try to go straight into the rollout stage, you're going to be putting in a ton of work, tons and tons of work. A lot of entrepreneurs never end up launching when they try to do this, and you're going to get small results, right? Either you might not launch at all, or that launch might be really delayed. Instead, you want to refine the amount of work you do in this idea stage, refine the amount of work you do in this alpha stage, refine the beta, and refine the rollout. Okay, so what I want to do is kind of talk about why founders get stuck in each of these stages. And this is going to help you identify whether or not you're in the right one, or whether or not you should move past your current stage and already be out of it and finished with it. Okay, so in the idea stage, we see entrepreneurs getting stuck here because of analysis paralysis. Okay, so analysis paralysis. This is a really common thing. Essentially, people consume too much information at this stage. They want to make sure their idea is valid, which is good. This is what you want to do. But they never get past the point of actually confirming that validation and moving forward into building it. And this is because they, maybe they figure out that their idea is valid, but they can't decide how they want to build it, or they just can't decide how to take the next step because they've consumed so much information about all the different features they could include in their solution, all the different ways they could go about building it, all the different ways they could create an eventual full scope product. So much information goes into this stage that they just can't figure out how to take that first initial step out of the idea stage. Now, if you haven't started building your app yet, but you have a solution that should be built, right? I'm talking to business owners or industry experts who are close to the problem they're trying to solve, and therefore they know there's a need, maybe because they experience it every day, or they see that this is a persistent problem in their industry, right? There's validation, but there's so much information consumption that analysis paralysis sets in. You just can't decide how to take the next step forward. It's so common. But if that's you, right, if there is a need, but you're not building your app yet, well, it's probably time to move forward and push toward the alpha stage. Okay, so building your MVP, building that core product, solving that core problem for your core user, building the minimum viable product so that you can start testing for functionality. Now, what about this stage, right? Because a lot of people get stuck in this stage too. It's very common. And the reason is because of scope creep, okay? And profit focus. This is a big one. Scope creep. So number one, people try to include way too many features way too early. Now, we already talked a little bit about your must-have features, your should-have features, and the timing of those. Well, people get stuck in this alpha stage for too long when they start building the beta features, when they start building the rollout features. But they never go into the next stage, right? They never go into that next round of testing. So they get stuck in this alpha stage. And over time, they end up creating this full scope solution, but they've never gone through the next appropriate phases to get the critical feedback they need first, okay? Now, the second, profit focus. Remember that the goal of this alpha stage is to test functionality. But kind of adding back to scope creep, a lot of people get stuck here because they're focusing on building a profitable product in the alpha stage. They're building on features that are going to help them make more money, build more revenue, right? Or even grow their user base. And of course, those are all necessary things and things you should be thinking about, but not when your goal is functionality, right? That's not to say that you can't be thinking about and planning these things yet, right? You obviously want to have a plan for how you are going to grow your app into a profitable product, but you can't be building those things in the alpha stage when your goal is functionality. Those have to be saved for later, which is why that kind of goes back into the scope creep issue, because you just end up building too many features that should be coming in later too soon. You get stuck in that alpha stage. So if this is you, if you have your core functionality in place and you can start testing that, move forward. Okay, move forward into the next stage, which is the beta stage. Now, what about here? Why do people get stuck here? Well, generally, it's because they haven't put feedback loops, right? Feedback loops into place. Now, remember that at each of these stages, you're really testing and getting feedback, right? You're looking for a specific outcome. Now, in order to get that specific outcome, you have to know what it is. Okay, so in order to test for adoption in the beta phase, you have to know what constitutes adoption. What makes up adoption for your specific app? What do you need to get feedback on? What are the KPIs or the key performance indicators that you need to get feedback on? What are the conversations you need to have? What are your goals? What are the goals for your users, right? If you don't have the answers to that, if you don't have those goals defined, you're going to have a hard time putting feedback loops into place. Now, we talked about feedback loops in other videos, but this is essentially something you want to build into your app before you start getting that feedback so that you can efficiently and effectively get the feedback. Right? You can't just bring users onto your app and then hope for the best, right? Just see what happens. You can, but I don't suggest it. You want to put feedback loops in place, and those have to have goals, right? So generally people get stuck in the beta phase if they don't have those in place. Therefore, they never get the feedback they need in order to move into the rollout stage, or they just have the wrong beta users. Maybe they start asking their friends and their family to start testing their app, when in reality, their friends and their family are not relevant to their app. That the solution is not relevant to them. Therefore, you're not going to get the right feedback, right? So getting stuck in this stage has a lot to do with just getting the wrong feedback. So if you're not getting the feedback you need in order to move forward, right, you need to focus in on your feedback loops. You need to focus in on those goals. What are you after? What's going to help you move into the next stage? The rollout stage, right? This is not the end game in that this is the finish line, because there's not a finish line. You're going to push forward and continue forward with the rollout phase for the lifetime of your app. But when people get stuck and they think they're ready for this stage, but they're unable to fully roll out, it's because there was poor execution, right? Poor execution of the previous stages. Okay, so they think they've gotten through this whole app development process. They think they're ready to go big with their app, but they don't get the results they want. And generally, it's because there was poor execution of the prior stages. You have to go through these stages and make sure you don't get stuck along the way, focusing on the wrong goals, in order to not only get to the rollout stage, but to continue with that rollout stage successfully. So, 9 times out of 10, when founders either skip from idea to rollout, or they don't execute each of the previous stages properly, they end up having to backtrack or start over. And we've seen this happen before with people, and it's hard because a lot of work goes into that, and a lot of time goes into that, and sometimes a lot of money goes into that. And you don't want to be put in that position, right? So you have to make sure that you execute these prior stages properly so that you can move into the rollout phase effectively and continue forward and continue growing and scaling your app from there. So we work with entrepreneurs every single day in helping them follow this correct process with their apps and even with their app-based businesses, because this is the start of that. This is the start of building the foundation upon which they grow those app-based businesses. And they quickly learn that you have to go through these initial phases in order to build that base upon which you can expand. Now, if you want help moving through these phases in the correct order, and specifically through past the idea stage, right? Figuring out how to take that first correct step, getting out of analysis paralysis, and moving into this testing phase where you have your minimum viable product, you have that core solution, and you can start testing for functionality. If you want help moving forward in the correct way, we may be able to help you, right? If you are trying to move past that idea stage. You really want to move into that functionality stage so that you can push yourself into bringing on your beta users. Reach out and let's have a conversation, and we can see if we can help you move forward with your app. You can go to coachingnocodeapps.com/apply, schedule a free strategy call, send over some information about what you're trying to do, and we can figure out if we can help you from there. All right, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.